My name is Esther. Once upon a time, my name sounded firm and confident. It was pronounced with respect, sometimes with fear. Now it echoes only in my thoughts, like the echo of something forgotten. I live on the edge of town, in a house that creaks with old bones every time the wind rattles the windows. It smells of dust, old wood, and silence, a silence that has become my friend. My children live in the center. They are successful. They have nice houses, expensive cars, and smiles for their neighbors and teachers at school. They remember me when something breaks in my house or when the doctor says something needs to be done urgently. But not to help, just to get it over with faster. They don't care how I feel. They think that old age is just about waiting for the end, silently, without getting in the way. My grandchildren. They stare at their screens. They avoid eye contact. I once dreamed that I would pass on my wisdom to them, that they would be drawn to my stories, to the strength of our family. But they shake their heads when I start talking. They say, "Oh, Grandpa, those old stories again." They are not interested in who I was. To them, I'm just a guest they tolerate because of family obligations. In the store, they don't notice me. I can stand there with trembling hands, holding a few bills, while the cashier talks to someone on the phone without even looking my way. The young people behind me start to get noisy, saying, "Hurry up, Grandpa forgot why he came here." But I remember. I always remember. Every detail, every insult, every shadow in their voices. At the clinic, the nurse talks about me in the third person, even though I'm standing right there. He doesn't hear, he doesn't understand. But I hear. I understand. Everything. Even more than they can imagine. They see old skin, a hunched back, trembling fingers. But they don't see the eyes. Eyes that once saw war for business, betrayal of partners, fall and triumph. Eyes that still know how to read people like an open book. Every day passes slowly, like the last act of a play where the audience has already left, but the actor is still standing on stage, waiting for applause. I eat breakfast alone. I drink tea alone. I listen to the clock ticking away like the pulse of a dying heart. The TV is on for the sound, not the content. Sometimes I read old newspapers, not the news, but my notes in the margins. Meeting with Nat, 1996, successfully completed the deal. Victory over Romchenko, 2001, don't forget how he wanted to betray us. I keep a diary. I have been doing so for many years. But now it is not memories that appear there, but something else. Short notes. Dates. Names. Behavior. Those who offended. Those who laughed. Those who remained silent when they should have offered support. They say old age is weakness. For me, it is glass through which you can see true faces. In youth, everyone is an actor, smiling, flattering. But over the years, I see who is who. And most importantly, I am now invisible. And in invisibility lies strength. You can observe. Study. Remember. And something inside me is starting to rot. Not my body, my soul. Not from age, but from indifference. It eats away at me like rust. Every morning I wake up thinking, maybe someone will call today. No one calls. I don't even reach for the phone anymore. Why? To hear, "Sorry, Grandpa, I don't have time?" I used to be a rock. People came to me for advice, for money, for protection. Now I ask my neighbor to help me with the electricity, and he says he's busy. I see him sitting in the yard with a beer. But for me, he has no time. This is the beginning. The beginning of something else. There is no more room for regret in me. Only silence, observation, and memory. And darkness, quietly stirring inside. I sat in the kitchen watching the evening sky burn. The sun's fire touched the horizon like an ember burning out in a cold stove. I used to love sunsets. For me, they were a sign of the end of a productive day. Now it's just another boundary between yesterday and today, which are no different. But memories come with dusk. They are always accurate. I don't forget. Once, my name was on the doors of 2 offices in the city center. Esther Group, a transport and logistics company that I built from scratch, without investment, without connections. Just my head, my hands, and a cold ability to read people. I remember my first office, a small room in a damp basement with peeling walls and an old telephone. I weighed 48 kilograms at the time and slept on a folding bed next to the bills. I was 26. My partner was fear of failing, of betraying my father's faith. But I never ran away. I started with trucks I didn't have. I just said I did. I took orders, ran around myself, negotiated with drivers, paid them twice as much as I got myself. But the customers stayed. Because I was accurate. Because my word meant something. In a world where everything can be bought, I sold myself as reliability. 10 years later, I had 18 vehicles, a logistics center, and a reputation. And enemies. Because I didn't pay bribes. Because I didn't bow down. They tried to break me. The tax authorities, the police, inspections. But I fought back. I survived. Always silently. Always one step ahead in the game. Then I met Galina. She worked as an accountant in a furniture workshop. I came to pick up chairs for the office and stayed because her eyes were clearer than numbers. We lived together for 33 years. 3 children. All born with the hope that they would go further, higher. That they would build a new world using the foundation I had laid in them, like a stone in a wall. I never drank. I never cheated. All the money I had went to my family. They went to the best schools. They had tutors, new backpacks, trips to camps. Maybe I didn't give them much warmth. But I built security. I thought that was more important. That love is a ceiling that doesn't leak. It's soup that's always there. It's the confidence that if you fall, you'll be caught. But Galina died first. Quietly. Cancer. Without warning. She didn't have time to say goodbye. Neither did I. I was negotiating with partners in Kiev at the time. I didn't make it in time. That was the first crack in my wall. I buried her in the rain. Alone. The children were already grown up. They came for a few days and then left again. Everyone had important things to do. And I stayed. With a company that no longer provided warmth. With children who had become distant. With memories that slowly began to eat away at me from the inside. I sold the business 2 years later. There was no point anymore. People had changed. The methods had become dirty. The competition was dishonest. And I felt that I had to either leave now or be destroyed completely. I chose silence. I thought my family would cover for me, but they just walked away. My sons now think I'm a relic. That I don't understand the world. That I'm ridiculous with my comments when they talk about how skillfully they hide their taxes. They say, "Grandpa, you're not the same anymore." But I was never like them. I taught them honesty. They learned profit. I instilled values in them. They chose comfort. Sometimes I think, maybe it's my fault? Maybe I shouldn't have kept quiet when Galia said, "You're cold to them." Maybe I shouldn't have put business above bedtime stories. But back then, I wanted them to have everything. I didn't want them to live in poverty like I did. I dreamed that they would be people. But they became successful. Not people. And now, they are strangers to me. I look into their eyes and see nothing of myself. Only irritation. A slight, pitying contempt. They give me help in an envelope, like a handout. But not love. I sit over my diary, and a shadow grows inside me. I used to be strong. Now I am transparent. But perhaps it is in this transparency that I will see my strength again. Because the past still breathes. I have not yet said my last word. When your body hurts, it's simple. You know what to do. A pill, a bandage, a doctor. But when your soul hurts, it remains silent. It doesn't scream, it rots. Slowly, under your skin, under your memory. And sooner or later, you start to smell of loneliness. People sense it and they walk away. I remember once waking up and the house was so quiet that I thought I had died. No sounds, no ringing, no footsteps. Only the clock, like drops in the void. I decided to go to Sergey, my eldest son. Without warning. Just to see if he would be happy to see me. He has a beautiful house outside the city, a high fence, and a neat terrace. I rang the doorbell. My daughter-in-law, Anna, opened the door. Her face turned to stone before she even said, "Oh, Grandpa, we're a little busy." I heard children laughing inside. My grandchildren. "You didn't warn us," she said. I stood at the door with a bag of apples and honey from the apiary. She didn't take it. She said, "Maybe next time." I rode back on the bus, clutching the bag to my chest. No one gave up their seat. I sat on the bag and thought that the honey would spoil anyway. Like everything else good that I still have to offer. Later, I ended up in the hospital. Something had been stinging in my side for a while. I got in line, sat down on a plastic chair, and waited. An hour. 2. The doctor came out and looked at me as if I were trash. "What's wrong with you?" she asked wearily. I started to explain, but she waved her hand. "Have you had your tests done? Who are you with?" "I'm alone." "Then come back with a referral. We don't accept walk-ins." I wanted to tell her who I was. To tell her that I had financed orphanages, that I had renovated this very hospital in 2004. But I didn't say anything. Because I realized she wasn't interested. She saw an old man sitting there because he was bored at home. The other day, I asked my grandson to help me connect a new TV. They know everything about technology. He came. He walked in with his phone to his ear. 15 years old. Cold eyes. "What, Grandpa, can't you figure it out?" he said with a smile. But that smile wasn't a kind one. It was mocking. He set it up quickly, threw the remote on the table, and left without saying goodbye. I sat in the same room and watched cartoons on TV because I didn't know how to change the channel. These moments, each and every one of them, are not just pain. They are little deaths. They don't see that something dies inside me every time they ignore me. I wrote everything down. Not out of anger. Out of meticulousness. Like I ran a business, facts, dates, names. Anna 0306 didn't open the door. Sergey 1807 didn't call back. Grandson Maxim 2308 laughed at me. Dr. Marchenko 0209 refused to see me. My diary was no longer just a piece of paper. It became a court of law. Each page was proof that I was no longer respected. And I, Esther, the former pillar of the family, became an invisible stain on their mirror. But I was still there. One day, something small happened, but it broke me completely. I was walking home from the market. I had bought some vegetables. My hands were full. One of the bags tore. I stopped and quietly asked, "Sir, could you?" A young man wearing headphones looked at me and said loudly, "Oh, look, another old man lost in time." The others laughed. 2 girls were standing nearby. They didn't help. They just smiled. And someone added, "He's probably just bored." My vision blurred. Not from tears, from something else. Something old. Something dark. Something distant. Like ice cracking underfoot. I didn't say a word. I gathered the vegetables silently. And left. But something inside me will never be the same again. That evening, the silence in my house was not empty. It rang out. Anger lived in it, like an old wolf released from its cage. I sat at the table and listened to the clock ticking away into nowhere. I won't scream. I won't fight. I'll play. And it will be a game in which I am the only one who knows the rules. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. I just sat in the dark, listening to the old house breathe. The ceiling cracked like skin over tendon. The clock ticked with a double accent like a gunshot in the silence. I held my diary in my hands. My black register of indifference. And for the first time I felt no pain. Only clarity. The world hadn't forgotten me. It just hadn't expected me to still be able to think. In the morning I went to the same market again. But this time it wasn't for vegetables. I just walked among the people, looking into their eyes. They were passing by. All the same faces, men in suits, women on their phones, students laughing among themselves. I was no longer the old man with the package. I was a shadow that remembers. I passed by the same guy who had mocked me the day before. He didn't recognize me. I remembered his jacket. His name is on the badge. He worked in a shopping center nearby. Timur. Interesting. I came home. I opened an old closet in the hallway, pulled out a box of papers. There, my old address book, closed for decades. Every page a contact. Accountants, analysts, IT guys, former journalists, private detectives, old friendly prosecutors. They were all still in the game somewhere. And I'd just putting chess pieces on the board. I wrote the first letter. An email. Briefly, need help. Contact. Esther. An hour later I received a response. Then a second. Then more. The former IT guy offered access to social media databases. Nothing illegal, just opportunities. A lawyer I knew agreed to check the property data. All under the guise of inheritance analytics. I didn't break, I researched. And what I learned began to form a plan in me. Not revenge, like in the movies. And a filigree, neat payback. I started with Anna, my daughter-in-law. She worked in a PR agency. Good reputation, blog, subscribers. I sent an old editor friend her student work, where she copied almost half from another source. Just a favor. A week later, a screenshot appeared in the comments to her posts. By chance, of course. Her reputation was shaken. The customer refused the project. And Serhi began to get angry. Then came her grandson Maxim. He was proud of his new place of work, a startup, a lot of noise. I found out that one of the co-founders was my former acquaintance. A quick call, a few reminders about the past, which should not be made public, and Maxim lost his job. They didn't explain why. They simply said, "Don't come." And then there was that doctor. Ms. Marchenko. It turned out that her son was a gamer. I simply submitted an anonymous file on him to social services. Not an accusation, a fact. She was called in for an interview. Of course, she didn't know who or why. But the next time I showed up at the same hospital, she recognized me. And her voice changed. "Come in, Mr. Esther. How can I help?" I passed by silently. I didn't do any harm. I was simply taking off my masks. I was showing them their faces. But most importantly, Serhi and Katerina. My children. I found out that Serhi had a second account, hidden from his wife. And she had an affair with a fitness club trainer. Neither of them knew about it. I just hinted to everyone through anonymous mail. Small photos. The bill. Everything looked like a mistake. But the result was uncontrollable. Quarrels began. The children saw for the first time how lies destroy something other than my authority. I was not a monster. I was a mirror. Now they called me more often. But not easily anymore. But with respect. They ask, "Grandpa, how are you?" But I feel not just concern. Fear. They don't know what I know. And this is my protection. I wasn't happy about it. I didn't celebrate. I just drank tea in silence. But in this silence there was no longer loneliness. It became armor. I won. Without shouting. Without malice. With intelligence. Observation. Patience. Once they laughed at my silence. Now they are afraid that I will speak. My house remained the same. The old curtains, the creaky floor, the tiles in the bathroom that I once laid myself. But inside, something changed. Not in the walls, in the look. In the silence that no longer seemed like emptiness. It became my ally. My background. My playing field. They no longer laugh. They do not despise. In the children's voices, pauses. In the grandchildren's voices, caution. In the voices of strangers, something resembling respect. Not out of fear. But because I had turned myself around. I did not punish them. I did not ruin their lives. I simply made each of them see something they did not want to see. Not my weakness, but their own. Their shortcomings were reflected in my silence, like a face in a mirror from which you can no longer look away. My neighbor Mikola, who once did not help me with the wiring, now stops by my fence. "Maybe I can help you with something, Mr. Esther?" he says. I just nod. That's enough for him. In the hospital, they no longer talk about me in the third person. My grandson Maxim comes again. This time, without a phone. He asks me to tell you how I started a business with no money. There's something new in his eyes. Need. Interest. He listens. And I speak. Calmly. Not like a teacher, like a memory. Serhi and Katerina still live in tension. They don't know if I know everything. But every quarrel in their house now washes away a layer of self-confidence. And when we see each other, they no longer look down on me. They see me not as a burden, but as a presence. Strong as a root. I didn't demand anything. I didn't shout, "Respect me." I simply reminded them who I am. And who I have never stopped being. And what about society? No, I haven't become a hero in the newspapers. But in the store, no one is pushing my shoulder anymore. The cashier says, "Good afternoon, Grandpa, keep the change." And when someone young starts to be rude, the others look at him, not at me. I have become reality again. Visible. But not to rule. But to leave a mark. My revenge was not destructive. It was healing. Deep. It was a bell in an empty church, not to summon, but to remind me that silence does not mean absence. I once thought that old age is the end. Now I know, old age is a mirror. And only a few have the courage to look into it. I did not forgive. But I did not hate either. I left everyone my truth, without shouting, without a fist, without tears. And that turned out to be enough. There is silence in the room. The wind flutters the curtain. Outside the window is autumn. I sit again with my diary in my hands. Now it is closed. I wrote down the last one. It is easy to destroy a person. But it is harder to make him see himself. I chose the latter. For even in the darkness of old age, I remain a light that the eyes of those blinded by pride remember. Esther.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.